At 3 o'clock in the morning, when most of the world is asleep, a man named Jake Morgan stopped at a quiet gas station off the interstate, hoping for nothing more than a cup of hot coffee and a moment to breathe. He had been riding for over 12 hours, coming back from his younger brother's funeral in Colorado. The weight of grief and exhaustion was pressing hard on his chest, and the only thing he wanted was silence. But that night, in that forgotten corner of Missouri, silence betrayed him. It let him hear something that no one was supposed to hear, something that would change the rest of his life. There are moments in life that don't wait for permission. They don't knock gently on the door. They crash through it. For Jake, that moment came while he was washing his hands in the gas station's men's room. The wall between the men's and women's restroom was thin, so thin, in fact, that it barely muffled the voices coming through. He froze when he heard three men talking, their voices low but unmistakably sharp. One of them said, "She's young, maybe 16, still has value." Another replied, "Look at her arms, man. You can see the needle scars." And the third one, in a voice cold and casual, added, "I'll give you $5,000. I can get her working by sunrise." Jake's stomach turned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was like the universe had pulled back a curtain to show him something dark, something evil. Then, over their cruel laughter, he heard another voice, a girl's voice, scared, trembling. She said, "Please, my mom's looking for me. Just let me call her." A slap followed. Jake could feel the sound in his bones. It echoed through that thin wall like a gunshot. He knew he had seconds to make a choice. When he stepped out of the restroom, the scene was already unfolding. Three men, mid-30s, baseball caps, average builds, walked out, herding a girl just behind them. She was thin, bruised, and her wrists were bound with zip ties. She looked up and locked eyes with Jake. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Two words. "Help me." One of the men noticed the exchange and shoved her forward. "Keep walking," he snapped. They were heading to a white van parked just outside. No license plate. Tinted windows. It looked like trouble, and Jake knew exactly what he was seeing. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bad situation. It was trafficking. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have backup. All he had was instinct, a leather vest stained with road dust, and a heart that still believed in doing the right thing when it mattered. He took a breath, stepped forward, and called out, "Gentlemen, got a minute?" That was the beginning. The moment a tired man at a gas station made a decision that would save a life. The three men stopped. One of them turned and gave Jake a look that tried to measure him up, maybe decide how much trouble he was worth. The man on the left slid his hand behind his back, as if reaching for something. Jake didn't flinch. He stood straight in his boots, road dust still clinging to his jacket, and said again, "Gentlemen, got a minute?" The one in the middle squinted. "Not interested in whatever you're selling, old man," he said flatly. Jake kept his gaze steady. "Funny," he said. "I was about to say the same thing." Then he looked directly at the girl. "How much?"
That shifted the air. The men stopped moving. Suspicion turned into something colder, greedier. "How much for what?" the first man asked. Jake crossed his arms. "Don't play dumb. I heard every word through that wall." The girl's eyes filled with shock. She thought he was one of them now, just another monster. She shook her head slightly, backing up half a step, her zip-tied hands trembling. $10,000, the man said after a beat. Non-negotiable. Jake nodded slowly. He reached into his vest and pulled out a worn leather wallet. Inside was $10,000 in cash, meant to cover funeral costs for his brother. He hadn't spent a dime yet. He counted it right there in front of them, placed it into the man's hand without a word. They watched him, still unsure. "Why should we trust you?" the third man asked. Jake leaned in, voice steady but low. "Because I'm standing here with 10 grand at 3 in the morning. Because I ride alone. And because that van out there has no plates and you look like men who just lost control of a situation. You need cash more than questions right now." The men didn't respond. They grabbed the money, turned without another word, and headed toward the van. Jake burned the details into his memory. The make and model, a dent on the left rear door, a cracked tail light, the stickers on the bumper. He watched until they disappeared into the night. Then he turned back to the girl. She was trembling. "Don't touch me," she said. "I'm not going to," Jake replied calmly. "I didn't buy you. I got you away from them." She didn't move. "You just gave them $10,000. Jake nodded. "I did. Because your life is worth more than that. And sometimes you buy time to find real help." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling for someone I trust. Not the police, I promise." She lunged forward, tried to knock the phone from his hand. "No cops!" she cried. "They'll send me back to the group home." Her voice broke, cracking wide open. "That's where it started." Jake sat down on the curb, motioned for her to do the same. Slowly, cautiously, she did. Her name was Emily Carter, 17 years old. She had been in the foster system since she was 8. The group home she'd been placed in was on the edge of Kansas City. It housed 19 girls and was run by 2 staff members. One of them, a woman named Ms. Crowley, had been selling girls out the back door for years. Emily didn't cry. Her voice was flat, distant, like someone describing a movie they had stopped watching halfway through. She told Jake that the woman used fear and silence to keep everyone in line. If a girl acted out, she was sedated. If she tried to speak up, she was punished. Emily had tried to run before. That time she ended up locked in a basement for 3 days. This time she had been trafficked across 3 states. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had come looking. Until now. Jake listened. Not once did he interrupt. When she finished, he nodded and made a call, not to the police, but to Marcus Hill, the club's attorney. Jake said just one sentence. "I've got a trafficking victim here, 17 years old. We need placement, and we need it outside the system." Within half an hour, a dark SUV pulled into the gas station. From it stepped a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a quiet strength in her walk. Her name was Sarah Daniels. She didn't wear a uniform or flash a badge.
What she brought with her wasn't authority, it was understanding. Sarah ran a safe house for young women who had survived trafficking. But more importantly, Sarah had once been one of them. 2 decades earlier, she had been found in the back of a freight truck outside Tulsa. She didn't tell her story often, but when she did, people listened. Because she knew the pain from the inside. Emily stood frozen when she saw Sarah. Her fists clenched. "You said no cops," she whispered to Jake. "She's not a cop," Jake said gently. "She's been where you are." Sarah didn't rush toward Emily. She crouched down to her level and said, "My name's Sarah. I'm not here to make you do anything, but I have a place, a real place, with food, safety, no locks, no judgment, just healing." Emily shook her head. She had heard too many promises. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, eyes narrowed. Sarah didn't answer with words at first. She slowly rolled up the sleeve of her right arm. The scars were faint, but still there.
a soft web of lines that trailed from her wrist to her elbow. They weren't fresh, but they didn't need to be. "Because someone helped me," Sarah said. "And now I help girls like us." Emily didn't move. Then, as if something cracked inside her, she dropped to her knees and sobbed. Sarah wrapped her arms around her and held her as if she had always belonged there. Jake stepped back, letting the moment be theirs. He wasn't the hero in this part of the story. He was just the one who made sure the right people showed up.
That night, while Emily left with Sarah, Jake sat with the local police and gave his statement. He described the three men, their clothes, their voices, and the make and model of the white van. His motorcycle's dash camera had recorded enough of the van to show a partial vehicle identification number. He handed over the footage without hesitation. The officer watching the video looked at him and said, "We've been tracking this ring for 6 months. This could be what finally breaks it." 3 days later, arrests were made. Miss Crawley, the woman who had been running the group home, was taken into custody along with 2 of her staff members. The evidence was overwhelming. 19 girls came forward, each of them carrying the same story in different voices. They had been sold, silenced, and forgotten. Until now. Within weeks, law enforcement located and arrested the 5 men linked to the trafficking ring. The dashcam footage and Jake's detailed recollection had been the final pieces needed. In court, those men stood behind bars as the girls gave their testimonies. There was no plea deal, no leniency. Each man received a prison sentence of over 20 years. Jake never went to the courtroom. He didn't need to see them punished. He had seen enough darkness in his life. What mattered to him was knowing that Emily was safe, that the door had closed on a place that should never have existed in the first place. Justice had arrived quietly, not with flashing lights, but with truth and persistence. And with that, one more shadow in the world had been pushed back into the light.
The days that followed weren't easy. Emily had been carrying more weight than anyone her age should ever have to bear. The road to healing wasn't paved with miracles, but with moments, tiny, hard-earned victories. She spent her first few weeks at the safe house in silence, sleeping long hours, waking up from nightmares, learning to eat without looking over her shoulder. Sarah and her team gave her space, but they never let her feel invisible. Jake checked in once a week at first. He never pushed, never pried. He brought books about motorcycles, a worn denim jacket with a patch that read, "Ride Free," and sometimes just sat with her on the porch without saying a word. One afternoon he found her staring at his bike, curiosity peeking through the quiet. "Why bikes?" she asked softly. Jake thought for a moment, then said, "Because when you're on one, the world feels big, and the noise in your head gets smaller. Because it's freedom. Because you're the one in control." Emily nodded as if something clicked. A few months later, on her 20th birthday, she asked Jake to teach her how to ride. She was nervous at first. Her hands trembled when she gripped the handlebars, and she stalled the engine more than once. But Jake never raised his voice. He walked beside her every time, reminding her that no one's first ride is perfect. And then, on a crisp spring morning, she took off down an empty back road, the engine humming beneath her, the wind in her face. When she returned, her eyes were bright. "I was flying," she said. "For the first time in years, I was actually flying." From that point on, Emily started building a life on her own terms. She got her license, bought a used Harley with a deep purple gas tank, and covered it in stickers that raised awareness about human trafficking. She enrolled in college, majoring in social work. But this wasn't just about a degree. It was about becoming the person she once needed. the person who could walk into a courtroom and speak on behalf of the girls who hadn't found their voice yet. She testified in hearings, volunteered with survivor networks, and sat beside young women in shelters who looked at her the way she had once looked at Sarah. And when people asked why she trusted bikers, why she rode with a leather vest and a quiet strength, she would answer, "Because when the system gave up on me, one biker didn't." A year later, Emily organized an event she called the Run for Freedom. 200 bikers showed up that day, engines roaring like a storm of hope across the highway. They rode from Kansas City to the state capitol, raising over $50,000 for victim recovery programs. At the closing rally, Emily took the microphone. She stood tall, hair pulled back, her voice calm but unshakable. 7 years ago, she said, I was being sold in a gas station bathroom. I thought my life was over, but one man stopped. One man paid attention. He didn't look away. Then she pointed to the crowd. That's what bikers do. They don't look away. Jake stood off to the side, hands in his pockets, not needing the spotlight. He didn't cry easily, but that day he did. He saw in Emily something more powerful than rescue. He saw transformation, not just of her, but of a whole community that chose to open its eyes.
After the rally, the Redemption Road Riders began offering training sessions on how to spot trafficking. They partnered with local shelters, helped raise awareness at truck stops and roadside diners. In the months that followed, 4 more girls were identified and pulled to safety, all because someone noticed something that didn't feel right. Jake wasn't the only one anymore. His act had become a ripple, and the ripple had become a wave. Back at Emily's apartment, above a small shelf filled with books and framed photos, hung one picture that never moved. It was Jake, standing next to his motorcycle, outside the gas station where they first met. The caption below read, "My hero, my dad." Jake had never had children. Medical complications had closed that door years ago. For a long time, that emptiness followed him like a shadow. But sometimes, life gives you family in a way you never expected. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a 17-year-old girl at a gas station, whispering 2 words through her lips. Help me. Emily now prepares to start graduate school. She's planning to specialize in advocacy for trafficking survivors. She wants to reform the system that failed her, to make sure that girls like her never fall through the cracks again. And when she speaks about the future, her voice carries purpose. I will become the person I needed when I was 17, and I will never look away. Jake still rides, sometimes alone, sometimes with the club. But every ride reminds him that sometimes the greatest roads we travel are the ones we never planned to take. He didn't become a hero by chasing glory. He became one by listening through a wall, stepping forward when it mattered, and choosing to act when everyone else looked away.